Welcome back, everybody. This is where we finished off in the last video. And as you can see, it works great. But it's a little more Hillary Clinton, and I would like it to be a little more Melania Trump. It does have form and function, and it's a little doppy. But if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you know I like a little more finished, refined, kind of a beautiful look. And, well, like I said, it works great, but we're going to make it better. So, let's get started on that. We are going to make some solid core doors out of some pallet wood. So, I'm going to get some pallet wood and we're going to get started. So I've picked out some of my roughest pallet boards. These are off a massive skid that I found at Ashley Furniture. And I'm going to try to use these as my solid wood cores. Let's see how that turns out. So the first thing I have to do to start the preparation on these boards is we have to cut them down. Most of these boards are like 98 inches long, no, 93 inches long. And they have a bit of a bow to them because, well, they're pallet boards. So I need 38-inch doors. So I'm going to cut these at a rough 40-inch to do all my milling. And cutting them down, I won't have to take off as much material to be able to get it nice and flat when I take it over to the joiner. 40 inches is going to work pretty well. And here at the miter saw is where I start taking some of the nail holes out. We want some of the nail holes left over, but we don't want a whole scad of them. So I'm doing my best to cut the end nail holes out and any splits, and we'll continue to do this as we go along. Now at the joiner, I make sure to pick out what I believe is going to be the best face to start with. Now this face will remain throughout the entire milling process. We'll use this face over at the planer to get a nice uniform thickness. But we need to make sure that this is the nicest face I can find, because the rest of it will come off over at the planer. I usually like to try to find the shallowest nail holes. This is usually the side that the nail head is not on. It's just a little bit smaller. We'll take the side with the nail head off over at the planer. So here at the table saw, I'm going to go ahead and cut these boards to their final width. Now I have a 42-inch cabinet. So that means two 21-inch doors. I'm going to have 2-inch rail and stiles, so that means I need roughly an 18-inch core. We'll cut the core down to the correct dimensions when it's all put together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 3 5-inch boards and 2 1.5-inch boards for each one of these doors. Why the 2 different size boards? Well, because I want it to look professional. You can't throw boards in there all willy-nilly and expect it to look good. Plus, we're going to be putting a round over on these boards. You'll see how that turns out here in a little bit. So you may be asking yourself, why do I run these through the table saw before running them through the planer? Well, I do it because when I come off the joiner with my 2 faces jointed, I set the boards with the jointed side to my right side. That way when I pick them up, that jointed edge goes right against the fence. And it makes it so that I don't forget where the jointed edge is after I run them through the planer. Sometimes I'll flip-flop them when I go through the planer and forget which side's the jointed edge if it's a fairly decent side. And for some reason, I feel like cutting the excess off now puts less stress on my planer as I run them through. There's no sense in running extra wood through your planer and creating all that extra stress and all that extra sawdust when you can just cut the pieces off right now. I don't know if it makes any sense to you, but it seems like it makes sense to me. I don't know. It seems silly, but that's how I do it anyway. Now we can go to the router and put the 1/4 inch round over on each one of the edges of these boards. Obviously, I've already ran them through the planer. I didn't show you that. Nobody likes watching that stuff, I don't think. If you do, put it in the comments. And I'll make sure to start showing y'all when I run it through the planer. Alright, so we got our... Nope, this one. Clamp set up. You know what? You don't want to see me glue here. You want to see me glue back there, don't you? Alright, we'll do that. Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to incorporate something here. Anyway, for now, come on over here. So after getting my boards arranged the way I like them, so you don't want all your nail holes in the same spot. You want to kind of scatter them throughout your door. That way they're less noticeable and, well, they just look better. And any of your bad edges you want to put toward the outside of your door. That way you can cut them off when you finally cut them to their final dimensions. I am also going to be running these through a rail and stile bit when I am all finished. That will take a little bit more off of the edges to keep any of the bad edges hidden as much as possible. Because nobody wants to see crappy edges on a nice solid core door, a wood panel door, a professional door, if you may. Now when gluing up a door like this, you want to make sure you don't use too much glue. Right now I am using a straw to clean out the grooves that have been created by the 1/4 inch roundover. You don't want those showing up when they dry. It is almost impossible to get them sanded out and have everything look good. So you want to make sure to clean them up now. That way they look pretty. I mean, we're going for good looking doors here. You don't want that ugly squeeze out showing in these nice pretty grooves. But you want to make sure you get enough glue to get a good bond between all of your boards. Because if you don't have a good bond, they're going to look all wonky when you put them all together. You don't have a shop quite the size of this one with all this room? That's fine. Set it and forget it. Instead of trying to lift these big, everyone's all over the place. So much easier. So while that glue dries, I'm going to go ahead and get to work on my rails and stiles. These come off some 1-inch thick pallet boards, and I have cut them to 2 inches as I had mentioned earlier. We're going to cut them slightly oversized because we'll trim them down to the exact size later on. Once we get them all cut and ready, we'll go over to the router table and run them through the rail and stile bit. Now I keep a piece that I set up a while ago to set up my rails and stile bits. I just set it on the table and then I'm able to adjust the height on my table to match that piece. Make sure everything fits good, and then I can run all 4 of my pieces through the rail and stile bits at the same time. It makes it so much easier when you have a setup block like this. If you buy the expensive rail and stile bits, I think they come with setup blocks. Mine are the Bosch set from Lowe's, and they did not come with setup blocks, so I made my own. This piece here is a piece I use to run the mortises, I guess. Nope, the tenons. I use this to run the tenon edge. What this does is it keeps my piece at 90 degrees as I run it through the router. And it works great. You can see me here test fitting these to make sure they're good. Everything's good, so we can go ahead and run through this real quick, knocking all 4 of these pieces out, and everything is going to come out wonderful. Now with a bit set like this, there is a bit of a learning curve, so make sure you're using test pieces before you go with your good pieces. And since that went so quick and my glue is still not where I would like it to be, we'll go ahead and cut out for the hinges. Now the best way I've found to cut out for the hinges is to take some double-sided tape and tape some blocks in where my hinge location is going to be. And then I can use this pattern bit that I bought, and it just rides right up against the blocks. It works great. You should really get one of these pattern bits. It makes everything so much easier. See, you just set the blocks on there, you put your bearing right up against those blocks, and there's no fuss, no muss. You don't have to be a genius to cut out these hinge mortises. It works great. And if you thought I was going to break out a chisel and square up those edges, no, I don't have any chisels like that. I'm just going to go ahead and round over the corner on these hinges, and everything's going to look great. You're not going to see the hinges, so there's no worry. Now that our glue's dry and we got everything out of clamps, we can go ahead and clean up this squeeze out on the back side. Little scraping, little sanding, little 80 and 120 grit sandpaper makes the back side all nice and smooth. The front side's already good because we cleaned it up before we started. We'll knock a 1/2 inch off of either side of this panel, and then we'll cut it to length. Now, to cut it to length, I use the speed square to square up my track saw, and then I take the measurements and line up my track. That way everything gets cut nice and square, because nobody wants an unsquare door. We'll explain that later on. But anyway, they're square for now. And cleaning up those edges by leaving it a little bit long when I made the door makes everything so nice and clean. Now this next part is a little sketchy. I don't suggest doing it this way. Jason Hibbs with Bourbon Moth Woodworking made a jig, and I need to make one of those. You might want to check it out. I think he has plans for it. It's definitely a safer way to do this. Probably a little more accurate as well. But anyway, I set my table saw to 7 degrees, and I'm just kind of pushing it up against the fence to create a little bevel on my doors. It gives it a very nice look, especially with those grooves in there from the router bit. I know you can't see it here, but you'll see it later. You just got to kind of stick around. It really makes for a good looking door, especially when you're using pallet wood like we are here. Now, I've cut panels like this in previous videos, and I know it's not the safest way to do it, and it's not the most accurate way to do it. I feel like I'm repeating myself here. What I'm trying to say is, if you don't feel comfortable making a cut like this, please don't do it. I am not a poster boy for safety, but this is how I get it done in my shop, and I want to be as transparent with y'all as possible. I will eventually make a jig to do this, and maybe we'll make a video of me making the jig. I don't know. We'll see. Now, I had mentioned that table saw cut not being the most accurate cut in the world, so what I'm doing here is I've lowered my router bit from the rail and stile that makes the tenon, and I have lowered it down to where it doesn't touch the bottom of my panel. And then I run it through, and that makes sure that all of my edges will slide inside of those dados from the rail and stile bit. It makes for a nice clean fit and everything fits great. Coming off that table saw, it's not always a perfect fit. I guarantee that if you do it that way, you will have a better time putting your panels inside of the rail and stile bits. I've done it before without running it through the rail and stile bits, and I'm telling you what, it is an absolute nightmare because that cut on the table saw is not accurate. You will have different thicknesses on the edges of your panels. This way makes it absolutely perfect, guaranteed every time. So every time I put one of these doors together with the rail and stile bits, whether it be with plywood or a solid core door, I feel like I'm just kind of fumbling around. Like I have no clue what I'm doing when I come back and do these voiceovers. And it just goes to show you that even a moron like me can make a nice looking door with these rail and stile bits. Eventually. It does take some fumbling around. You just want to make sure that when you put these doors together, you only put the glue on the tenons and don't put it on your solid cores. The solid cores will shrink and that will cause problems for y'all later, and you just want to put them on the edges. You don't put them on the core at all. Just the edges. See? Just right there. That's all you need. It doesn't take a whole lot of glue to hold these doors together. If you've cut them right with a rail and stile bit, they will fit together nice and snug, leaving you just enough room for glue, and they'll look great. I mean, like I said, I'm just a guy in a garage trying to put doors together. And, well, all of my doors have looked pretty good at the end, anyway. You know, I didn't think about it till a few minutes ago when I flipped that one over to clean up the squeeze out. I could flip this whole thing up, wipe that glue off, and not break my back even a little bit. That is friggin' awesome. Awesome, I say. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I love it. That is so nice. Now, what we have to do is go ahead and put this back down and clean up them edges on them doors. So nice. Come on, let's go clean these edges up. So just like when we did the cores, we're going to square up the assembled doors the same way. We're going to cut them to their final dimensions. I put the speed square down and line up my track saw to cut the first edge. And then what we'll do is we'll flip it over and we will measure to the edge of the track, and that will bring us to our final dimensions of, well, I guess our almost completed door. See, you turn it around, you get your track, and you get your tape measure, and you measure from one corner to one corner, and from one corner to the other corner, and you should end up with a nice square door. And, well, of course, it comes out square. I mean, it would be silly if it didn't come out square. So, I know not everyone has a track saw. The only thing I can tell you is the track saw is a complete game changer. It makes tasks like this so much simpler. You could do this on a table saw, and if you have a very large miter saw, you could do it on a miter saw. You could even do half of it on the miter saw, flip it over and do the other half. But the track saw makes this kind of task so much simpler. It really is worth the money you spend on it. Once we have everything nice and square, I'm going to go put a 45-degree bevel on all four sides because I like the 45-degree bevel. You could go with something fancier like the OG, or, you know, maybe a groove and bead bit, or, you know, whatever it is you prefer. I prefer the 45-degree chamfer. I set it about halfway through my door, and I just run through and knock off all 8 sides, and it looks great. See? Look at that. That is a fine looking door, fellas. So the only thing left to do is put these hinges on and get it installed. You can see back there behind me, I've already got one door in, and now it's time to put this one on. Now I'm using a self-centering hinge drill bit. You push it down and it works really well. It lines up your holes perfectly so that your screws don't move your hinge around on you when you go to put it together. You should really try to get one of these. They work really well, especially if you do a lot of hinges. Now the hinges I bought at Lowe's, they're some barn door hinges. They were like $5 a piece. I wanted a really heavy duty hinge because these doors are going to be holding a little bit of weight, like the weight of the table actually. And I had to cut the doors so that they would actually touch the floor. Now, if you know anything about my channel, you know my shop floor is nowhere near level or flat or correct. My floor is garbage. So what I'm doing here is I'm using playing cards to try to get my door to where it kind of looks like it might be level. And it's really kind of a pain in the butt when you don't have a good shop floor. Because my floors are garbage, I'm using the playing cards to set my gaps. Once the gaps are good, I went ahead and screwed it to the side. And I actually had to take them off a couple of times and use the track saw to cut off the bottom. That way my doors would swing the way they are supposed to. You're not going to really notice the difference in widths on the rails and stiles on the bottom, but what I did is I made them to where they would touch the floor in the full open spot, and it really what's the word here, it really holds up the table well. But it did take a couple of tries to get both doors absolutely perfect. Once my doors were swinging the way they were, we can go ahead and put the hardware on there. I use a combination square to set the distance from the top, and I use the Craig hardware jig to set my hole positions. Once it was marked, I can go ahead and send the drill bit all the way through, and then all we have to do is screw the hardware down. Now this hardware, it's nothing special. Again, just some hardware from Lowe's. It was a look I liked, and you don't have to use it if you don't like it. But I like the way it looks, so that's what I went with. I wish I could have got the hardware that matches the cabinets on my miter saw station, but I would have had to order those, and I didn't want to wait for them to show up. So this is what I got. I got like 6 different kinds of handles in my shop now. So that is going to do it for today. We still have to get this top covered up because it's really ugly. I have plans for that. Come back next week and see how I do that. As far as dimensions, we are 7 3/4 inches out. We are just under 40 inches in height, and that's folded up. So it will absolutely not be in the way when it's not in use. We have nice snappy doors because I put some little clippies in here. You can get them down at your local blue store. I imagine they got them at your orange store too. We lift it up, set her down on the doors. Nice solid work surface. We can lift them up to clean on all four. We can adjust them side to side with ease. I could put 2 cutting boards in here. One on this side, one on this side. I could put a full door in here, as y'all have seen. And I still have 36 inches from here to here for walking room or whatever activities. I have 34 inches from the wall and 25 inches of clamping capacity. And it is just easy no matter what you do. Everything is so easy. Beautiful. I like it. That's all I got today. So please hit that like and subscribe. Come back and see me next week when we do this top. It's going to be awesome because I need a place to put glue and brushes and maybe even a home for my bride and alley. So come on back, see me. I will see y'all next week.